Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to the opening session, or the general session of the Windows Infrastructure track. My name is Bob Kelly. I am the General Manager of the Windows Server Product Management Organization. I'm very excited to be here today. I know that this is the kickoff of a very long week for many of you, where you'll get inundated with loads and loads of great information about the cool Microsoft technology, as well as the technology from many of our partners. What I want to actually tee up for you today is actually a couple of key scenarios around Windows XP and Windows Server about what's cool and what's coming. We have a lot of technology coming down the pipe over the next 12 to 18 months, actually 6 to 18 months, and I want to break it up into that kind of a timeline and show you what you can expect from us, how we're focused on making your job a little bit easier, and at the end of the day, delivering more value to your business. As you know, a big theme of what we're talking about at this TechEd is, as Steve discussed this morning, integrated innovation. Integrated innovation really is Microsoft's approach to how we believe we can drive more value into the software stack, focus on the integration of the infrastructure software, and allow you to focus on the business solutions that you need to bring to bear for your particular company. When we think of integrated innovation, we actually think of it as an architecture of a bunch of different pieces that come together for one common purpose. That is to drive out the cost of managing, deploying, securing, and operating your business infrastructure. So what we're going to drill down on today is Windows Server 2003, which acts as the platform for the Windows Server system and the foundation for integrated innovation. Tomorrow at Andy Lee's keynote address, you'll see a lot more about this particular stack, the way we think about Windows Server System, what the value proposition of Windows Server System is to you, and how we will approach driving cost out and increasing the business value of the infrastructure that you're putting down. So today we're going to talk about Windows Server 2003 and Windows XP Client and the improvements that we're focused on over the next 6 to 18 months. When we think about, sort of the technical roadmap and the things that we're trying to get done for you, we really try to approach it from a themes-based model. And the themes are not just marketing shtick. They really are an approach for us to think about how do we drive value proposition all the way through the software in a way that the software speaks what that theme is, what the value proposition is. At the end of the day, there are many, many, many more of you than there are of us. And we need the software to help you do what it's supposed to do. So we focus on themes. In 2004, it's no surprise that theme number one is security. You have all suffered through the last 2 years in the same way that we have, and in many respects probably worse than we have. Security is an imperative of the company. You heard Steve talk about that this morning. Every single event, whether it's internal, external, with partners, with customers, that Steve talks or any of the executives talk at, we really have to nail down this point that we are serious about what we're doing from a security architecture, from focusing on not only developing great code, developing secure code, but ensuring that you have the tools, the resources, and in many cases the prescriptive guidance for how to deploy our technology in a secure fashion. The very close corollary to that, of course, is manageability. Manageability is the buzzword right now at Microsoft. It is the thing, it is the core of the Dynamic Systems Initiative that Steve talked about this morning. And it really is about, again, focusing on building manageability into the application and the infrastructure so that applications and the infrastructure can come as self-managed as possible while not actually making your job redundant. 64-bit support, a very significant effort for us as we head out into the SP1 time frame. You'll see some, and I'll show some details later about what we're doing for our platform around 64-bit support. And of course, virtualization, a technology that we're extremely excited about. In fact, a trend we're very excited about throughout the whole stack of software and what we're going to be doing with Virtual Server 2005. As we move forward into the 2005 time frame, we'll focus on 4 main themes. Mobility. There's some very, very cool advances we're making in what we call our anywhere access infrastructure. And I'm going to show you some of those improvements and those scenarios that we're going to drive after in 2005. The second area is identity management. Steve teed up this morning WSI and some of the things that we're doing around web service standards implementation for Active Directory and other directory integration. Tomorrow you'll hear even more momentum, not only Microsoft and IBM, but many third parties that are actually driving together to go drive some more standards implementation for identity management and identity federation. So another key area that we're focused on. Network defense. It's not just enough to develop a secure node. We must think about the network perimeter and ensuring that you have both the tools and the technology to lock down your distributed infrastructure, to be able to defend the network should something happen. We actually have an approach where we're actually thinking not just about the resiliency of the actual system, but also the ability to defend or go shields up should something happen and something goes into the wild. And finally, branch office. In the U.S., I have U.S. data, I don't have global data. I apologize to my worldwide friends here. In the U.S., in the enterprise space, there are on average 120 branches for a large customer. For each of those branches, the data suggests that between $5,000 and $8,000 a year is spent on just backup alone in each branch. That's a massive number. Okay? What we're going to do is actually focus on some key technology that we can deliver in the 2005 timeframe to actually help reduce some of those costs, focus on stripping out some of the cost of managing your branches, whether they're 3 branches or whether they're 150 branches. There's still real costs there, so we're going to focus on that cost structure. So those are the big themes as we head out over the next 18, 24 months. I want to drill here for just a moment on security because we all know it's such an important topic for you, and in fact it's such a critical focus for us, not only on the server side, but as importantly on the client side. Life has changed pretty dramatically over the last few years. The time between the product ship, a vulnerability discovered, a fix made available, and then the deployment of that fix is closing very, very quickly. It used to be, at some point in time, NIMDA was about, 2+3 years ago? There were 331 days between when we made the fix available and when the vulnerability was discovered and when the fix was deployed. Okay? That window has shrunk dramatically to the point of Blaster where it's 25 days, which means that you are constantly on your heels now as these viruses come into the wild. Right? We must actually focus not just on better code, but the tools that enable you to be successful in a world like this. It's not enough to just be reactive. We have to be proactive in order to solve this particular problem. 9 days is the average for a patch to be reverse engineered. 9 days. Okay? That means that as soon as we come out, the clock is ticking. And that means your environment is vulnerable if you don't have the infrastructure to be resilient against these attacks. So the way that we think about Windows XP SP2, which is the first key piece in our software development to solve some of these problems, is actually thinking again about resiliency and shields up. Okay? The way that we think about this again is 4 key areas. We're focused on 4 key elements that are going to help you as you try and lock down your environment for a secure computing experience. The first is network protection. How many of you have used ICF, Internet Connection Firewall? Okay? You should think of this Windows firewall as something like ICF on steroids. Okay? What it does is it actually enables the firewall by default on the client. There's problems with that. The problems are, how do you get access to an application that requires a port to be opened? Okay? Well, we have some technology that we're going to be delivering in XPSP2 that will allow you to lock down that client, and on a per application basis, you as IT administrators can enable applications that can open those ports. So we'll show you that in just a moment. The second area that we're focused on is safer email and IM. And this is essentially attachment blocking. Right? Any of you that have used Outlook Express or even Outlook with message filtering know that you can block exes. Well, this is actually now going to become part of the operating system platform. So that you can block executables as they come in, because as you know, many times those executables are spoofing something and they're actually trying to come in and do some malicious intent. So the goal here is to actually be able to block that at the infrastructure or the operating system level. The third area is safer web browsing. The most annoying aspect of browsing the web today is pop-ups, bar none. Just the most annoying aspect. And it's a drain on resources as your network is trying to actually bring up actually a piece of work item. At the same time, you're handling all these pop-ups. As an end user, it's a nightmare. So focusing on pop-up blocking and ensuring that the end user experience of the internet is a much better experience. And then 4 is protection against buffer overruns. With Windows Server 2003, we introduced this /GS switch, which essentially is for a developer as they compile the code. You can throw this GS switch and it will insert some extra data so that the buffer will not overrun. Okay? And we also, at this point in time, introduced NX support, or no execute support. This is both in combination with Windows XP SP2, as well as we head into the x64 world with AMD and Intel's extended 64-bit architecture, where you have it in the hardware side as well. These technologies will really enable us from a client side to lock the PC down, to make it much more secure, and to enable you to have a better end-user experience. But as you know, and as you're all going to tell me, it's not enough to do each node one at a time. You have to be able to think about the whole infrastructure. So what we're going to show you is how we link this into the back-end infrastructure, particularly Active Directory and policy, and how you can use the combination of this lockdown client and the distributed infrastructure to enable a much more secure environment. How many of you got hit by Blaster? Well, that's great, actually. Very small number. What we have found is that those customers who had Blaster, or who got hit by Blaster, one of a number of different scenarios was happening. One, maybe they weren't on WinXP. Even if they were on WinXP, because of the nature of Blaster, it basically enabled unauthorized access through a DCOM call, and it took over the machine, and you were toast, right? And essentially, the machine would continue to reboot constantly. There was a constant set of reboots. Well, if we had had Windows XP SP2, this wouldn't happen, because we've actually now changed the architecture, and no unauthorized DCOM call can get executed. Okay, so some very fundamental things within the architecture of Windows to enable a much more secure environment for your users and for your infrastructure. Okay. This is the bit about how it's so important for us to not only focus on the individual node, but really focus on how you can leverage a distributed infrastructure to drive a more secure environment. How many of you have Active Directory fully deployed? How many of you that have Active Directory fully deployed are leveraging group policy? Okay. With Windows XP SP2, not only are we extending the power of group policy, which effectively means using a policy and doing one-to-many management. You enable a policy, you roll it out across all these PCs that you want to have the same configuration. With Windows XP, we've actually enabled things like the firewall configuration to be a policy object. And now you can enable that firewall configuration, roll it out one-to-many, and you have locked down your entire environment with one keystroke effectively. Right? That is the power of leveraging Active Directory, group policy, and the infrastructure to drive a more secure computing experience for the end users and ultimately for your business. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on group policy, as there was a very large preponderance of folks that are using it already. Okay, so with that, I'm going to ask Brian Marr to come on up. And Brian is a product manager on our Windows client team. And he's going to go ahead and demonstrate to us some of the XP SP2 enhancements so you get a sort of real-world experience of what it's like.
XP Service Pack 2. The real focus of this endeavor is really reducing the surface area that's vulnerable to attack. So looking at areas like the network, attachments, web browsing, and memory, and focusing on those areas and building out proactive protection technologies to help our customers be more secure. Second, we're trying to make it easier for IT administrators to manage this. So adding in group policy objects that essentially for everything, so that every aspect of it is under your control in some way. And then finally, in an area where you're not able to set these objects for your customers, let's say that they're out of your domain or something like that, giving customers the information so that they can make smart choices and secure choices. And what I want to do is kind of walk you through each one of those areas today and show you a few examples of what we're doing in Service Pack 2. So the first real area here is, and I think one of the best examples of it, is something new to our control panel. It's called the Security Center. And I'm going to show you two different views of it. The first view is the view that someone not on a domain would see. And I have the IT administrator domain view as well. But this is a good graphic visual of of the way that a customer would see this and a way that would allow them to make smart choices. So what we see here is the three major pillars of security aggregated all into one area. So you have firewall, automatic updates, and virus protection. As you can see, my virus signature has gone out of date within the last few hours here. So I'm actually showing that my virus signature is out of date. Firewall is actually another option. Let me show you that. So if we were to turn off the firewall, though it recommends that we don't, number one, it shows me I have a red balloon here. Second, I get a pop-up telling me that my computer might be at risk. So this is a great way for someone not on a domain, and then actually information to make it secure again. Someone not on a domain to really keep track of their PC and make sure that they're keeping it secure. If you were on a domain, this is what you would see. Essentially it says, you're on a network domain, your administrator is taking care of this PC, please don't touch it. It's in good shape. And
most of you have told us you don't want your end users using automatic update. Right? You don't want them punching through the firewall or going out over the internet to grab those updates. Right. And so what we have here is the experience for the end user who is not centrally managed, as well as one that is.
Right.
And I'm going to show you a little bit about Windows Update Services later, which is the infrastructure that you might deploy, which is essentially a cache of the Microsoft Auto Update experience. Okay.
So actually just looking at that firewall and maybe drilling into that just a little bit more, I have an application here that is architecturally the same as any peer-to-peer, RPC, any type of app like that. It's an application that goes out and sniffs the network or waits on the network for inbound traffic. And this application, I'm just going to set up a network game here. What's happened is it's hit the firewall and it said, I want to listen on the network. The firewall has come back and given me a pretty simple dialog box that says, you can unblock this program, you can keep blocking this program, or you can block it and then go ahead and ask me again later. So what's happening here is we have the firewall on by default. All ports are closed. We had a little bit of a catch-22 here, right? I mean, the way that we thought about it was we can enable a firewall and break a lot of things, or we can leave a firewall off and we can have problems like Blaster because the PC isn't secure when it's out of a domain and out of your protective hands. And so what we think we have here is a good solution where if an application wants access, it can ask for it, and you can easily give it access. And I'm going to show you how, as an IT administrator, you can grant that for a much larger suite of applications in just a second. So I'm going to go ahead and unblock this program. And if I go down here to my firewall settings, into the exceptions list, this is obviously a new dialog, I can see that NetChess is now in there where it wasn't before. And if I were to say have an application that I didn't want in here, very simple to just remove it. And if I were to run NetChess again, it would ask me one more time. What it's doing is each time with that exception list, it's checking the application is checking against the exception list. Am I okay to go out? And then the firewall opens that port. When I shut down the application, it closes the port again. So you don't have a port that's specifically open for that application that something else could use at any time. It has to be on your exception list. So the big thing is, great, how do I manage this? How do I turn it off? How do I administer different parts of it? We have a new group policy object for Windows Firewall and for essentially anything else that's in Service Pack 2. I want to show you the firewall one today. The thing that I love about this is that we have both a domain profile and a standard profile. So a domain profile, for example, you could set up perhaps particular subnets that have access to one another with peer-to-peer open specific ports there. You can add a whole host of applications to the exception list. There's various things that you can do all through this list here with your group policy objects. And then with the standard profile, you could actually choose to say not allow any exceptions at all. So if you have customers who are out on laptops and once they leave your domain environment, you don't want them running peer-to-peer applications like file sharing or whatever it happens to be, you can actually lock them down and keep them much more secure when they're outside of your domain. Now the next big area of focus I mentioned before is on attachment handling. And we've done, Bob mentioned it before, we've done some work in Service Pack 1. So XEs and there's certain types of applications that could be malicious are blocked from running on your system. We also have done quite a bit of work on the server side where these things are stripped out and you don't have to worry about them. So this is really a scenario where you have a customer who's part of your domain, and maybe they're loading Hotmail in their Outlook box. You don't necessarily want them to. I certainly do it at work, even though I may not be allowed to do it. So this is a good example. John Doe, for example, sent me an exe. This is nothing new. It's an exe. It's been blocked. The difference here is that we've written a public API so that people who are writing applications can actually write, even if it's an exe or something like that, can write a safe application or an application that will work here. I'll give you an example of that. Let's say my Aunt Edna, I don't really have an Aunt Edna, but sent me a game. And I know that this is an exe, and I know that it's coming from her, and I know that it's safe. It's in a zip file. So we've done some work with attachment handling that is a little bit smarter around zip files. That's a way that people have been able to get in these executables in the past, is they package them as part of a zip file. We've even seen zip files that have passwords on them that virus scanners can't check. This is a way to help protect against that. So I've gone ahead and saved this to my desktop. When I open it, it's going to block it. My PC is telling me that this is not safe. Now the point here is not to keep me from doing anything or keep me jumping through hoops to get stuff done. What it is to put just a little bit of a bend in the road to keep me from making a knee-jerk reaction as a customer. So it tells me, hey, this might not be safe. Maybe you want to learn a little bit more about it, and I can click on that and do that. But I also know that just by actually right-clicking on this, going to Properties, I can unblock it like that, and then have no problem opening it up. So it's one extra step, but it's a great way that if you do want to open that type of application, you can, if you know where it's coming from, but it puts that extra step in the road. The final thing that I wanted to show you is around web browsing. So as Bob mentioned, pop-ups are one of the most annoying things that we have, and there's plenty of great pop-up blockers out there. We have one built into Service Pack 2 that comes on by default. Again, you can turn it off with a group policy object. Let me give you a great example. I hear you guys on the server team are all big Britney Spears fans. Is that,
oh yeah, huge.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, look at that. Look at all these pop-ups on Britney Spears' website. So I'm going to go ahead and shut all these down. I think more open up. But right here in the tools area, I had turned this off. It comes on by default, but I'm going to go ahead and set it back on again. And when I reload the page, no pop-ups, but it tells me here that pop-ups have been blocked, and I have a bunch of choices that I can make. Make smart decisions about which ones I want to see and which ones I don't. The final area in browsing is around add-in software. So ActiveX controls are great. They make browsing the web that much more interesting. There's so much more that you can do with ActiveX that you can't do with HTML. Here's a great example of an area where you'd want an ActiveX control to load. It's a calendar on a flight website, and you can't really pick your flights without it. So what it's told me up here on the top is to protect my security, it has stopped this add-in from loading on the system. I can easily click on this, allow it to install. This is new right here. This is an example of that UI that I was talking about that makes it easier for customers to make good decisions. In the past, we used this massive end-user license agreement that, where OK was checked by default, or that was the default option. Here you can see that don't install, the safer option, is the default option. So if I accidentally hit Enter, I'm not going to load malicious code onto my system. Second, we've scaled it down quite a bit so that you know exactly who this is coming from and why it's coming from them. And you get a ton more options where you can choose Ask Me Every Time, I always want to install something from this company, etc. So if I install it, it's going to go ahead and do that, load the ActiveX controls on my system, and everything will work great. So I believe I've used my time here. In summary, we have done quite a bit to secure the surface area of the operating system. And so we've done things like enhancing Windows Firewall, enhancing the web browsing or making it safer. There's the no execute stuff that Bob was mentioning before, which I didn't show you a demo of. Also, we've put a lot of power in your hands as well so that you can secure all these things and make the choices, the appropriate choices for your customers. Finally, when they're out of your control, when they're out on the, not connected to a domain, when they're connected to, say, a hotspot or the TechEd 2004 wireless access point or something like that, then we have areas here where they can make, or where you can make safer choices, and we've given the appropriate dialogue for that. So thank you very much. We have a demo in the Windows booth. There's hands-on labs all over the place. please come and check them out. This is a great technology. We're really excited about it. Thanks.
Thanks, Brian. In the bags that you got handed out to you when you registered, you actually have the latest release candidate of XPSP2. I strongly encourage you to go install it, use it, and determine whether it's going to be the nirvana that we think it can be for you, or whether it's just going to be one more pain in the backside piece of software that Microsoft delivers. I actually believe it's the former. I think you'll be happy with it. So as Brian said, we really believe that we've done a number of things to enhance the security, increase the manageability, and improve the end-user experience and the IT experience with XPSP2. But there are a number of other things that are coming as well. One of these, how many of you have used or know what Microsoft Prescriptive Guidance is? Excellent. We're doing such a great job of marketing that. If you go up to Microsoft.com and go to Patterns and Practices, Microsoft is actually delivering many pages of guides that will tell you exactly how to deploy our technology in key scenarios. One of the ones that we're delivering in the late fall time frame is the Business Desktop Deployment Solution Accelerator. And what this does, as well as some other prescriptive guidance that's associated with SMS, is it actually will show you how to use SMS to deploy XPSP2, how to deploy Office 2003, how to deploy these great technologies, and what the best way is that we have figured out through our labs with our partners. Most of these prescriptive guidance are actually stacks of software and hardware partners that are tested out in our labs with our partners, and then they show you. You got Cisco infrastructure. Here's how you do it. You got F5 infrastructure. Here's how you do it, and so on. It's very good prescriptive guidance, and I think it will actually go a long way towards helping you implement more secure, more manageable applications and infrastructure. Okay, so on the client side, you just saw some really great things. Well, you know what? We also have some great things coming on Windows Server 2003. Windows Server 2003 is a very good product. Thank you very much. It is a very good product. There are third parties out there. Gartner has historically told our customers, and perhaps rightly so, don't deploy until you see the first service pack. With this product, when we shipped it, they said, it's ready. Deploy it. And you know what? The data says you're deploying it. So kudos, that's great. We feel very good about the quality of this product. But we also know that Service Pack 1 is a very important release for us for a number of different reasons. One, reliability improvements across the board to address the customer issues that we've run into this point. Our internal Microsoft OTG has been running the release candidate, or the beta of our Service Pack 1 for about 6 months, and has 5 nines and to 1 reliability uptime. 5 nines uptime with this service pack. They've never seen this quality of service pack from any of the product teams. We know that this addresses the core issues that we've run into as we've gone into the wild with this product. From a security perspective, we've actually focused on a number of things. For the relevant technologies from the client side, we'll bring those into the server as well. Security Configuration Wizard. As you know, with Windows Server 2003, one of the things that we focused on was actually locking down the server at the default installation. This is a big, big balance, right? At the end of the day, one of the reasons why Windows Server has been successful for you and for us is ease of use and ease of deployment. But ease of use and ease of deployment is right square in contrast with security. Okay? Those are the big tensions. So what we did with Windows Server 2003 is we focused on locking down that system by default. And so, for example, IIS, Internet Information Server, is not installed by default with Windows Server 2003, whereas it was with every other version of Windows Server. Okay? Because we knew that that was a source of pain. So we focused on that. The Security Configuration Wizard, which Mike Stevenson on my team is going to come up and demo for you in a moment, actually allows you to take that same approach for the other server roles, not just for IIS. Okay? So it's a very, very important piece of work. Boot time network protection. As I said, one of the challenges of Blaster and several of the other big viruses that have hit is when a client or a PC gets it, it goes into a perpetual reboot. Because as the machine gets cleaned, and then you bring it back up, as it's coming up on the network, it actually looks to the network first, gets dirty, and gets the virus again. Okay? What we've done with SP1 is actually put boot time network protection in so that the network, before it comes up, the firewall turns on. So that server can't get dirty. Again, part of that shields up attitude. And then finally, VPN client inspection. I make fun of this one because you'll see us describe it in about 18 different ways because Microsoft is so good at naming our features. We have 18 different marketing terms for it. VPN client inspection, quarantine, you get the idea. VPN client inspection was, originally we shipped this as a part of the resource kit. When I log into Microsoft, I don't have my smart key with me. When I log into Microsoft to access corporate resources, I actually get checked. I get quarantined every time I come on the network. And it looks to see what my latest signature file is, make sure I haven't gotten any viruses, and so on. And then if I am dirty, I get shunted off until I'm clean, and then I come back on. Okay? Well, you need to do that across all the scenarios, not just a VPN. You got to do it on a wired connection, on a wireless connection. You never know when a PC goes off or a laptop comes off, and then it comes back in, what it's gotten in the wild. Okay? So focusing on VPN client inspection and ensuring that as that end user comes online, they get cleaned and then actually entered onto the network. With SP1, we lay down the basic infrastructure. You'll see us iterate on this in the next release of Windows Server, which is called Windows Server 2003 Release 2, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that going forward. But we will iterate on this infrastructure and deliver that full client inspection infrastructure, both on the client side and on the server side. Of course, increased performance. We're seeing at least 10% improvement in performance across the board for each of the core workloads. SP1 is also the foundation or the basis for our extended 64-bit work. The 64-bit work does not come in SP1. It will ship at around the same time. But at that time, we will deliver extended 64-bit support for the AMD architecture and the Intel architecture. Single binary. Okay? So you will be able to have 32-bit, the extended 64, and full Itanium support from the Windows Server family. Okay, with that, I'm going to have Michael Stevenson, who is a group product manager in my organization, come on up and demo for us Security Configuration Wizard.
I brought you a patterns and practice guide.
See?
Securing.
Patterns and practices for securing a Windows Server infrastructure.
So as Bob said, as I figure out where my mic is.
We can do most things, we just can't use a microphone.
As Bob was saying, we've done a lot of work in Windows Server 2003 to secure it by default. A lot of services are turned off, a lot of ports are disabled, etc. But as you know, you don't get use out of the server until you enable some of these services. Windows has a lot of power, a lot of different workloads, a lot of different roles, a lot of different environments that you can deploy it in. And what we've done, to date with this release is that we provided a guide that walks you through how to configure it for security in these different roles. Well, with each release of the product, we look for ways to automate your tasks, make it easier for you to do your job. And one of the things that we're doing is we're automating the tasks of taking a lot of the configuration settings that you used to have to look in a guide to get, and we're putting those into a tool that we call Security Configuration Wizard. So as we look at the screen here, what I have is a server, and there's a number of services already running. You'll notice, for instance, the FTP publishing service is running. That's a service that's running. It adds to the overall attack surface of the server. It opens up ports, etc. So let's assume that we want to set this server up as a web application server. And keeping that in mind, I'm going to launch this tool, and I'm going to click Next, and it's going to give me a number of things I can do at this point. So we can create a new security policy. We can edit an existing security policy. We can apply an existing security policy. So let's say we've already created a security policy for a web application server. We can actually apply that to this server or other servers on the network. Or we can roll back a policy that's been applied to this machine. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and walk you through creating a policy for a web application server. It's going to ask me what server I want to apply this to or use as the base server. I'm going to choose the local server since I left my network back in the office. And what it's going to do now is it's going to go and scan that server to see what roles it's capable of supporting. And one of the things that we've done is we've taken a lot of the dependency information, what ports need to be open, what services, etc., and we put them in a configuration database. So what this shows, it shows all the different roles that this server can perform. For instance, it can be let's just pick one, a Radius server. When I open that up, it tells me what services I need to run Radius. It tells me what ports I need to open to be a Radius server. So there's a wealth of information that's in here to really understand what the dependencies are, what the different ports that need to be open, There's administrative options. There's all the different services have been documented and what ports they need to be open, what ports there are available, and what actual physical ports that they open. So let's go ahead and click out of that and go back to the wizard. And what it's going to do now, it's going to ask us a series of questions about how we want to configure or what role we want to put the server in. And again, the role that we're going to put it in is a web application server. So I look through the different options here, and I want the application server. I don't really need the ASP.NET session. I don't need the file server. I don't need the FTP service. I'm not going to use military COM objects. I do want SQL Server there. I don't want Telnet, and I do want the web service to be there, actually, and the application server. So those are the things I'm going to select for this particular role and click Next. As you know, the server can also run a number of client applications. For instance, there's a DHCP client for getting an IP address. So if I was going to deploy this on the intranet and I wanted to dynamically assign it an address, I'd want this client running. However, if you're going to put it on the internet, you're probably going to assign it a static IP address, and you wouldn't use things like the DHCP client. You wouldn't use things like dynamic DNS registration and WINS, etc. So we can disable those. It's going to ask me a number of other questions. I'm just going to kind of move through this quickly. It's going to ask me about services that it doesn't recognize. So there's no way that we're going to know every single service that could be running on the machine, for Microsoft and third parties. So it gives me an option to disable all those services or leave them as is, and I'll go ahead and choose to leave them as is. And then another nice thing about this tool, it gives you a report. It shows you all the changes that will be made to the configuration based on the options that we have selected. As I click Next, it's next going to ask me about some of the network security settings. So it'll show me all the different ports that we have open on the server. And knowing, again, that this is going to be a web application server, I want HTTPS, I want HTTP, I don't need RPC, I don't need NetBIOS, I don't need SMB.
That right there is one of the great features. I mean, we have been told by customers, you've got to help us figure out what ports are assigned to what roles, what services, help us figure it out, lock it down. But this gives you one big view of all the potential ports that are open, and then you can just simply close them off. And it's also got kind of an intelligible name. Who knows what port 80 is?
Yep.
Right? You know it's HTTP.
You can also, you can notice as I move the mouse over this, it brings up a more descriptive description. The SQL Server ports, let's assume we're going to run SQL Server on this box and we don't want it accessible by other applications over TCP/IP, so we'll disable those. We might want to leave terminal server on here for remote admin, and these things we don't really want either, so I'm getting rid of all those. And we'll click Next. Again, it shows me all the changes made, etc. It's going to ask me a number of other questions about registry settings, about what my audit policy needs to be, about specific things for IIS, but I'm going to go ahead and skip through those so we can get to the real meat of the demo, I guess. So then it gives me the opportunity to save this policy. And I want to save it for a couple of reasons. This might be the standard policy that we use for every web application server in our environment, or I want to save it because I want to apply it to a machine, make sure that it works well, and roll back any changes that may not work. So I'll call it Web App Server and go ahead and click Next. Then it asks me if I want to apply it. I'm going to go ahead and click Apply Now, and it's going to apply that policy to this machine. So this will take anywhere from a minute to 2 minutes, depending on the number of services you have to start and stop and the number of ports you have to close, etc. So while this is happening, I just want to note, to find out more about this tool, there's a session on Thursday at 8:30 that will go into great detail on how to use this tool in the scenarios that we're talking about, as well as other scenarios. So please make note of that, and if you're interested in this, you can go to that session for more detail.
And that session actually talks also about how to use group policy to manage security configuration wizards.
Absolutely.
You can take these objects and roll them out and manage your infrastructure from Active Directory.
These are
Since you're all Active Directory users, clearly here, it's a good start.
So this is finished. I'm going to go ahead and click Next. It tells us it's finished. And I'm going to go back to the services view that we saw when we first started the demo. And notice that I haven't refreshed it yet. The FTP services and a number of other services are running. I'm going to go to Action. I'm just going to hit Refresh. And now notice that the FTP service, as well as a number of other services that weren't needed, were disabled and stopped. So again, this is a tool, Security Configuration Wizard, that's coming with Service Pack 1 that will help you automate the process of locking down your servers for specific roles, as opposed to having to go and get familiar with a guide like this. This is still useful, has a lot of useful information, but this will hopefully make your lives much, much easier.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Mike. Okay, so I've decided officially that I am a geek because I thought that's really cool stuff. Security Configuration Wizard is not generally something that has a lot of sex appeal, but I think it's pretty cool. What you've heard to this point is basically the kinds of things that we're putting in place to make it a little bit more proactive through our service packs, make the infrastructure a little more proactive in helping you defend against attack. Let's accept it. Reality is there are a lot of bad guys out there, and they're trying to attack the system. There will be more software vulnerabilities, either software bad code we've written, bad code a third party's written, or someone who's being malicious. How many of you used or even have heard of Software Update Service 1.0? Okay, that's fantastic. As we head into the fall time frame, we will release the next release of the Software Update Service. Think of Windows Update Service 2.0, which is formerly SUS. Again, that whole naming thing I was telling you about earlier. WUS 2.0 is essentially a pipe between Microsoft.com or Windows Update and your infrastructure, and essentially acts as a cache where you can bring down all those patches or all those fixes from Microsoft.com. You can test inside your infrastructure, package it, do whatever you need to do, and use your software distribution engine, whether it's SMS or Novodyne or HP or whatever it is, and use that infrastructure to roll those patches out. The big deltas between 1.0 and 2.0 is in 1.0 it was really just for Windows. Windows Client, Windows Server. Okay? With 2.0, we actually now, you can add all of the patches for Office, SQL, Exchange, and Windows will be available through that pipe. We are actually thinking of this service now as a core infrastructure service that will ship as a part of Windows Server. And what that will do is it will actually then become a third-party pipe as well. And the API will be exposed so that third parties can attach into this, and we can build an ecosystem around patch management that makes it much easier to roll out, and if something goes haywire, to roll back those changes. And then SMS will be built on the same engine. So we will have finally one engine from Microsoft, whether it's in a standalone configuration or in the most distributed infrastructure, for managing patch distribution. Roll out, roll back. We're very excited about this technology. Again, obviously, we're kind of geeky. But at the end of the day, we know that this is the kind of thing that you need in order to be able to protect your environment against the bad things that happen against our software. Okay. This is the point where I actually say we're doing a lot of work. We are really doing a lot of work to try and make the software that we build a better experience for you. But it is a contract between us. You have something to do and we have something to do. It's the old adage of people, process, and technology. We've all gotten accustomed to the Windows world where things have been so easy that in some cases we have forgotten that it actually takes work to implement this stuff the right way. So there are some things that you should do. One, learn. Get the best training you can. Read that prescriptive guidance. Go up to Microsoft.com and get patterns and practices. You will find out there's an awful lot of really good information about the guidance across all of the different technologies we talked about and across how to build secure and reliable and scalable applications on top of that infrastructure. 2, test and evaluate. Get SP2. You've got the RC in your hands. We'll get you the pre-RTM code. It'll be available on Microsoft.com at SP2 Preview. Get it, use it. Start using the Active Directory that I know you are all using and start testing this in key scenarios. Plan for deployment. Leverage the technologies that I was describing earlier in the Business Desktop Deployment Solution Accelerator, a very good name for guidance. Defense in depth. Consider multiple countermeasures. It's not just good enough to have one approach. Consider multiple approaches. Okay, and then finally, upgrade those systems. This is the pitch. We know that the experience for end users and for corporates is better on XP. We just know it is. So we're asking that the contract between us actually moves the infrastructure forward. Steve tried to make this point this morning as well. It is almost impossible to do the kinds of things we're trying to do with this software on down-level systems. It's just impossible. They were designed for different goals. right? So really, we have to get this infrastructure up to XP and Server 2003. How many of you are using Server 2003 in any capacity? Okay, that's great. I'm very excited to hear that. I know it's a better product. I know it is, and I know you're having a better experience with it. Okay, that's XP, SP2, SP1, and Windows Server in the Windows Update services. But there's a lot of other things that are coming over the next 6, 9, 12 months that you need to be aware of. You need to start preparing for. In 2004, of course, there is Small Business Server 2003 SP1 in addition to the SP1 for Standard Server. We have the 64-bit extended systems. We have a new release of Tablet PC, and I'm going to talk to you about that in a moment. We have the Media Center. We have Service Pack SP2. We have Virtual Server 2005. I love Virtual Server 2005. Are you guys using it? Anybody testing it? Okay. We're going to show you some really cool demos of Virtual Server. That is one of the coolest technologies we have released, or not quite released, in a long time. Very exciting stuff there. In 2005, you'll see client and server beta of Longhorn, as well as a recently announced new release of Windows Server 2003 called R2. This release will actually slipstream into your Windows Server 2003 infrastructure. It doesn't change any of the core binaries. It's focused on a couple of key scenarios like branch, the anywhere access that I was telling you about earlier, and SP1 or SP2 of Windows Server 2003 will apply to an R2 or a gold code Windows Server 2003. So from a testing infrastructure, you don't have to worry about this new introduction. But this comes before Longhorn Server. XP Tablet Edition, one of the things that we found when we rolled out the first XP Tablet was that it was not a very IT-friendly release. We found that most customers don't want to have multiple client images depending on the hardware configuration or the form factor. So with this release, there's one image now, support for one image to be able to deploy down, whether it's an XP tablet or whether it's an XP desktop or an XP notebook. So this really is a very IT-focused release, if you will. Other areas, improved functionality with the pen and inking. Pen and inking is really cool technology that, again, you have to be really kind of a geek to like this stuff. But it is a very cool paradigm that has shifted, for example, the way that I know I work. I actually look at all of the documents that I review now only in tablet form because I can actually write my notes on them. And it's much easier for me to write notes than it is to keystroke, right, and insert comments and all that. So it's just changed the way I work. And what we're doing with the tablet 2005 edition is making it much easier for things like autocorrect and auto-sense for misspelling and all the things that you expect within your normal experience where you're keystroking, similarly with your pen and inking. This will be available roughly around the same time frame as XP SP2. I think it's shortly thereafter. And it's available to existing V1 users as a free download via the web. Okay? Very cool technology. On the server side, we actually think of the server business in a slightly different way. And this is based exclusively on conversations we've had with many of you. When we think about the way that customers deploy servers, we have found that they deploy them in roles and in workloads. Roles essentially are the smallest footprint, if you will. A single role would be like a DNS server. But a workload might be an identity management server that has multiple roles clustered together on a single box. So when we think about the workloads that customers are deploying, we're actually building our technology to be the best server infrastructure for that workload. Best of breed for every workload with integrated innovation so that you have the best experience across the stack. That's how we think about this business. And we're going to be focused on a number of these core workloads over the next 12 to 18 months, as I said, around virtualization, around branch, terminal services. Some of the things I'll show you about our anywhere access. These are really core to the way that we think about not only the value proposition of Windows Server, but the way that we'll start talking to you about how you deploy your technology. We want to be best of breed in every single workload, but deliver value across the management architecture, across the security architecture for all workloads. So as I was mentioning, Virtual Server 2005 is a very important release for us. We see virtualization happening across the entire stack, whether it's at the application layer or the network layer or the storage layer. And it's no surprise, you've heard this same thing happening, whether VMware is pitching the same thing, and you hear from Veritas, and you hear from other partners of ours, that they're actually thinking about virtualization across every workload, across the stack of the infrastructure and application software that you're deploying. There are some key areas that we're focused on, however, with Virtual Server 2005 that we think are quite exciting. They are software test and development. When we first showed this, a beta or a demo of this to our internal development staff, I remember the Active Directory team, they saw this and they were blown away. And the reason they were blown away was because they realized with this virtual server software, they could build out an entire Active Directory infrastructure inside a virtual machine on one box and never have to deploy all those many boxes that they have to deploy with physical assets to test out what the scenarios would look like. You can do it in a virtualized environment. That's very cool. From a test and dev perspective, this can accelerate dramatically the flexibility and the time to deployment that you will go through as you are testing out either an application or some infrastructure. The second big area that we see a very significant need and that our customers have been demanding from us is migration and consolidation of legacy applications. In an NT4-based world, we've done a lot of analysis of our customer base to understand what's going on with NT4. And what we have found was massive server sprawl with NT4. And specifically with NT4, most of those boxes were at about 20% utilization. And the cost to manage all of those individual boxes and to secure that infrastructure, that perimeter, is just almost unbearable. That's why we see many customers moving as quickly as possible to O3 to consolidate. But there are a lot of applications that you will not be able to bring over overnight. We know that. What this environment will allow you to do is to run a legacy NT4 environment within a virtual machine hosted on a Windows Server 2003 box. So you actually can move your infrastructure over to O3, but keep that legacy app for running key business processes. But they're running in a virtualized way. Okay? Very, very cool technology. Obviously something we're very excited about. And with that, I'm going to have Michael come back up and demo for you Virtual Server 2005. As he's coming up, I also want you to know you can go up to BetaPlace today. Betaplace.microsoft.com, I think, is the URL. And you can get Virtual Server today and start banging with this thing. How many of you are using Virtual PC? You know the technology. Now just imagine that on the server-side infrastructure where you can consolidate a lot of big boxes onto one or fewer big boxes.
Thanks, Bob. So what we have here is we have the administration interface for Virtual Server. And as Bob was alluding to, we're really focused on three key areas for this release. We're focused on making Virtual Server, Server 2005 the most cost-effective virtual machine for Windows Server. The second thing we're focused on is automation. Automating a lot of the things that I'll show you today manually. All the tasks can be automated through a COM API that the functionality is exposed through. And then the third thing that we're focused on is making all this manageable through your existing management tools. Management tools like MOM, SMS, ADS, etc. all work with this. So it doesn't require you to invest in a new management infrastructure to manage a virtual server environment. So again, what we're looking at here is the administration interface. I have a number of virtual machines. And view of a virtual machine as an independent installation of the operating system, applications, configuration settings, etc. That run, where multiple of those can run on a single physical box. So I have 6 of them running here on a single physical box. And there's a number of things I can do through this interface. I can create new virtual machines or virtual disks or virtual networks, etc. I can go in and I can edit properties or edit the configuration for a virtual machine. For instance, if I wanted to change the memory limits or how much memory I want to allocate to this specific virtual machine, I can do that, as well as the network resources and CPU resources, etc. Going back here to master. So Bob talked about a couple scenarios that we're really focused on for this release. One of them being streamlining your test and pre-production environments. We hear from a lot of IT customers that they constantly have these machines standing by. They go and they configure them. They'll make some changes to them to see if updates or a new application that they're rolling out in their environment will survive in that environment. So what I have here is I have an example of a pre-production test environment. I have a number of things loaded on here. This has, my SQL Server database. It has BizTalk and other applications that I have in my environment. And I can now perform tests. I can, for instance, do updates on this and see if the applications I've written are going to be impacted. Or I can see how a new application deployed in this environment will survive or not survive. As opposed to going through and writing a new application and deploying a new application, I'm just going to make a simple change. I'm just going to go to Properties. I'm going to go to Desktop, and I'm just going to reset the background. And view this as simulating, adding, changing the configuration of this machine. And one of the problems with is once you go through and do all your testing is how do you get it back to original state? Well, a lot of times that requires you to go blow away all your test environment and reestablish that. And again, that takes time, money, etc. Well, there's a feature in Virtual Server that we call Undo Disk. And what Undo Disk allows us to do is to go in, make a number of changes to the configuration, and get back to the original state very easily. So let me show you how we're going to do that. We're going to go to this virtual machine. We're going to turn off virtual machine and discard Undo Disk. So I'm going to say OK, and that's gone. That virtual machine has stopped. I'm going to go ahead and restart it, and we'll notice that the configuration will come back to its original state. So while that's happening, I want to kind of drill down into the second scenario that Bob was talking about, and that's a scenario where you can consolidate several of your legacy applications onto a single box. So here I have a couple NT4 applications that are running. If I click on this one here, it's an Access application. It's not widely used in the organization, but it's an application that some of the business groups within your company may need. And therefore, as opposed to supporting this on a separate box, you can support this application or multiple of these applications on a single physical machine through the virtual server technology. Moreover, we can do this in a more reliable manner. For instance, let's assume that this crashes or this goes down for one reason or another. We'll go ahead and simulate that just by turning it off. There's scripting abilities and the abilities to automate where you can actually go take a snapshot of the state of a virtual machine on a regular basis and automatically bring it back up or go in, as I'm going to do now, to another virtual machine that's here and go to Programs and just restart that application. And it will get back to the most previously saved state. So again, the machine goes down, you can bring it back up in a very quick manner. And everything that you just saw here, you can also automate through the scripting interfaces that we have available in the product. So let's go back here. Our other machine has come back up. Let me just go ahead and quickly log into this to show you that the state has been restored to its original state.
The problem with demos is you got to remember all the administrator passwords. I can see Michael's brain kind of seizing there for just a moment.
Is it my office password that I use here? Is it? It used to be. We used to be able to use no password or just PW. I'm giving away all the secrets, but with security such a concern, we have to have strong passwords, and that was a strong password. So as you see here, the state of the machine came back up. The background is no longer the nice picture that it was before, and that really demonstrates you can make a lot of changes to the configuration, blow away the configuration, and come back to its original state. So Virtual Server will be out later this year, as Bob was talking about. We're really excited about this release, and we really think that this is going to help you streamline your test and pre-production environments and also help you consolidate many of those legacy applications that are taking up hardware space and resources onto a single physical machine.
Great. Thanks, Bob. Okay, so we have continued development, continued a lot of work and a lot of value that we're driving out to you. The 64-bit extended system support, this is now a full client and server offering across 32-bit, extended 64, and Itanium. At the same time that we ship SP1, we will deliver support for, as I was saying, the x64 work. The reasons why we're so excited about this, one is we honestly view that within about a 12 to 18-month period, every system you buy, 100% of the systems you buy, with the exception of the Itanium boxes, will be extended 64. 100% of them. They will flip. Okay? The great thing about this is you can run a 32-bit operating system and a 32-bit app on that extended 64 architecture and get performance improvement. You will get performance improvement. So what it does for you is it gives you this notion of flexibility. As you want to enter into 64-bit for key workloads, you'll be able to do that at your own pace without requiring the massive overhaul of the architecture. Okay? What we have seen already is if you look on that chart, on the left-hand side are sort of the key workloads that we see moving reasonably quickly and some of the results that we're already seeing in our tests. 32-bit database is up to 17% faster just running on the 64-bit extension. 32-bit business apps, SAP has 10% more users. Again, just running on the new hardware with that bit flipped. Networking, file, 111% higher user capacity. Terminal services, 50% more users. This architecture literally will allow you to have more performance, more scalability, while just simply flipping overnight and taking advantage of that 64-bit extension. We're very, very excited about this. AMD and Intel have done some tremendous work, and what we are doing is really focusing on driving this infrastructure and this paradigm shift cross-client and server so that you get the benefit as quickly as possible. As I mentioned, there's another release of Windows Server 2003 coming, and we call it the R2 release, or the release 2 of Windows Server 2003. It is built on SP1. Okay? That is the foundation. Windows Server 2003 with SP1 is the foundation for R2. We're focusing on a couple of key scenarios and themes. Streamlined and secure information access and branch office workload optimizations. There's a couple of key licensing things that you need to remember. Windows Server 2003 R2, it is the only product you'll be able to get the day we ship it. You'll no longer be able to get gold code. You'll be able to get it. Don't worry about it. You'll figure it out. We all have licensing models. We know how to go down level and get those bits. But we are going to flush the channel and actually only have the R2 bits. R2 is an SA benefit. If you have your servers on SA, if you have Windows Server 2003 with SA, you'll get R2 at no cost. Okay? We told you that we were serious about driving value into SA. This is one way in which we'll do it. If you do not have SA, you will need to buy a new L, a new license, to get these benefits. There will be no upgrade. That is the whole value proposition of SA. VUPS went away. However, it will not trigger an additional need to buy a new Windows Server 2003 CAL. If you've already CAL'd up to get to 2003, this does not trigger the need to get new CALs. Your 2003 CALs will work against this product. Okay? There are 4 scenarios I'm going to tell you about, and then I'll take some questions and let you on your merry way. The first is seamless anywhere access. How many of you are using RPC over HTTP? How many of you know what RPC over HTTP means? Okay, thank you. RPC over HTTP is basically using your Outlook client without VPNing in and punching into an Exchange 2003 box and getting your email with no VPN. Okay? We are actually going to focus on some other scenarios to enable similar experiences for other workloads. The most annoying thing about RPC over HTTP or Outlook Web Access is when you get an embedded file link to a file share and you click on it and you can't get access. With R2, you'll be able to. We will have SMB essentially over HTTP. So you'll be able to get access to your file server. Okay? That's very cool. We will also enable what we call TS proxy, which is anywhere access for applications, where you'll be able to, with a terminal session, punch in and get access to your host, your application inside the firewall. And we have a couple of other scenarios we're looking at, but I'm not going to commit to today. This becomes a platform for actually enabling truly an anywhere access experience for the end user. And for you, as the IT shop, you will be able to lock it down because you will point to the servers, for example, with the SMB proxy, that only these servers can get access. So you can say these servers become a mirror of certain types of information, and users can punch through to those. You'll be able to manage this via policy. It's a very cool set of scenarios that a lot of customers have told us would be the single reason to upgrade to the new infrastructure. The second area that we're focused on is what we call identity federation. As I said, tomorrow you'll see some very significant momentum we're announcing around federated services or identity federation with the industry. What Active Directory Federation services do is they extend the benefit of Active Directory to enable cross-org single sign-on. Today, for you to do that, you have a business partner, you want them to have access to your corporate network, you have to actually create a user account for them, and you have to manage that user account. With Federation, you actually be able to authenticate across the infrastructure without having to have those user accounts on either side. Okay? That's super powerful. The other advantage is it's totally standards-based. This is, as Steve was mentioning this morning, we are absolutely committed to ensuring that the standards that are required to do true federated services, that to do truly seamless computing, as we like to call it, are available. They're web services. So what we're going to announce tomorrow is Active Directory Federation as a web service, and we're going to talk about our vision there. But in the R2 timeframe, we will actually make this real. Okay? The third scenario is network defense. Network defense, client inspection, quarantine. That's three names for the same thing. Okay? Right now, we actually have the scenario from home, right? The VPN and the dial-up. That was what I was describing to you with my smart card. We will also then focus on the other scenarios of the returning laptop or an unhealthy desktop, or even consultants or guests that are coming onto the network, where you'll be able to ensure that those PCs that come online are secure, have the latest signatures. We'll look across three main areas. We'll do a health checkup. We'll make sure that that PC is healthy. The second is we'll focus on network access control. Only those clients that are passing the check will get network access. If they don't pass the check, they get shunted off to another piece of the infrastructure where you can have signatures being downloaded or whatever it is that you need to do to ensure that end-user experience. And then health maintenance. What you'll end up with is a scenario where the PC is actually in the background getting updated for new signatures and enabling a much better experience end-to-end for either a laptop or a desktop, whether it's connecting physically or connecting wirelessly. And then finally, simplified branch servers. This is my favorite animation of the entire deck, if I can figure out how to do it. Essentially, think of it this way. In today's world, what has to happen to enable true replication and a branch scenario is stuff gets copied down to the branch, data gets copied down to the branch. Any changes that are made there, the entire document or all that data gets copied back over the wire. It's not particularly bandwidth friendly. Right? So what we're focusing on in this particular release is to go out and actually focus on just moving changes across the wire. We will use our distributed file system and what we call file replication services as the infrastructure for this distributed branch infrastructure. Okay? What it means is you can manage centrally from the data center, but back up centrally as well. So you'll have essentially a cache in the branch. Right, that you can manage as a cache, and if it goes toes up, you get another box and you jam it in and you sink it right back down. All right? That means, again, if the data that I described to you earlier is accurate, which I know it is, $5,000 to $8,000 a year per site just to do backup locally can come out of your IT budget and you can focus on other things. Okay? This is real value. We're very focused on this, and it's a key scenario of R2. Those are the four areas of R2 that we're committing to today. There's other things as well, but schedule may force us to not deliver on those in the short term, so I don't want to commit. But I know that there's real value here. And as I said, this infrastructure will not cause you to reset your test environment because the core binaries, the kernel, all of that stuff is exactly the same as Windows Server 2003 SP1. Okay, so if you've done the work on SP1, you've done the work for R2. And you can slipstream these new boxes in for these key scenarios to drive increased value to your organization. So how to get involved? It's extremely important to me and to my organization and to Microsoft as a whole that we have this two-way conversation. Get involved. Use the betas. Try the code. Give us your feedback. It's very important on SP1, on Virtual Server, and of course on the 64-bit extended. I know you'll love this. Go to the AMD shop, around the corner over here, and there's some real cool what they call the gaming pit. Man, that is an amazing experience on the 64-bit system. Not that you're really going to do that in the IT shops, I know that, but you're still going to do it anyway. Use the Windows client and server news groups. For us, it's a great experience to be able to talk with you through the news groups, but it's also, quite frankly, you talking to each other. You'll get answers very quickly to your questions. If you're not using them today, I promise you they're a very robust experience. We've also focused on ensuring that we have mechanisms. Steve talked about Watson this morning, which is a sort of a technical way of gathering input from crashes. We also have a site called windowsserverfeedback.com where you can go tell us, this feature is what I want in Longhorn, or this feature is what I want in R2. Here's the limitation we're seeing in Active Directory rollout. Are you focused on this? And all that data gets pushed back into the development team and prioritized based across whether lots of customers are asking for it or whatever. Give us your feedback. Give us your input. This technology, as well as some other technology that we're working across the company, will become part of the fabric of our products. And within the product experience itself, you'll be able to tell us what's working, what's not. We really want that feedback. And of course, go to the relevant sessions this week. I'm technically kicking off the track, but there were already 5, 6, 7 sessions that happened today. There's a lot of really good, detailed, technical sessions that will happen this week that will give you very good understanding of, how does virtual server work? How does WUS work? What's going on behind the scenes when you do this branch architecture, right? What actually really is happening? There's a lot of great stuff in the Windows infrastructure track this week. I'm sure you're as excited as I am. So at the end of the day, what are we here for? Honestly, our goal is to help you, as Steve says, do more with less. It really is a core value proposition that Microsoft is trying to drive to the market and drive to you. We know you're getting pinched and pushed every day to do more with less. We're trying to help. 2, we believe fundamentally that our approach to integrated innovation will help you deliver against the business results that you are being asked to deliver against. 3, evaluate the code. Give us your feedback. We want these products to be excellent. The only way they'll be excellent is if you're testing them for us. With us, not for us. I said that, didn't I? It was one of those Freudian slips. The roadmap, really, we hope it helps you plan. Microsoft, you know what? We haven't been very good about that. We haven't been very transparent about our roadmaps. We're trying to get better about that. It's one of the core sort of, mantras that I have in my organization is to tell customers what we're doing. Tell them. They want to know. It'll help them plan their business. And of course, we value your input. Share it with us. Give it to us in any format that you want, including, if you don't get the answers to the questions that you want today or the rest of this week, send me a piece of email, bobkelly@microsoft.com. I probably won't be able to answer every one of them, but I can guarantee you that I will find an answer for you and I'll get the right person for you. Okay, with that, we have about 5 more minutes and we can either take questions with the microphone or you can just come on up and I'll do my best to answer them. Thank you very much. Have a great TechNet. TechEd.